Well, New York police remain locked in a slowdown, one that means a steep drop-off in parking tickets, as well as tickets for offenses like carrying open containers of alcohol or public urination. So why the slowdown? Well, it's a union-led effort to push back against Mayor Bill de Blasio. The police union believes that de Blasio has thrown police under the bus and supported anti-police protesters. Rolling Stone's Taibbi writes, quote, "I don't know any police officer anywhere who would refuse to arrest a truly dangerous criminal as part of a PBA-led political gambit." So the essence of this protest seems now to be about trying to hit de Blasio where it hurts, i.e. in the budget, without actually endangering the public, end quote. But is the slowdown actually a bad thing? Or is it actually putting police in New York back into their correct role of arresting those who endanger the public instead of policing for profit? I was joined earlier by journalist and author Taibbi, and I began by asking him about that issue of policing for profit, or as it's known in New York as the broken window policy, and whether or not it's unique to New York.
Oh yeah, absolutely, and it's spread through pretty much every major metropolitan area in the country. There's one version or another of the same kind of policing tactic.
Yeah, so the problem with these policies, obviously, it's the ticketing policy, right? So every time you see a police officer, people, immediately reach for their wallet. They're going to take something from me, right? Whether I'm going to get ticketed for driving the wrong way, parking the wrong way. There's this concern. Isn't there kind of this problem where policing for profit created this disdain between the public and police in the first place?
Yeah, I think so, and I've talked to a lot of police officers who complain about it themselves. I wrote a book about this subject, and a lot of police talk about wishing to go back to the old days when they just responded to calls and fought crime and investigated crime and developed sources and informants. This new tactic, this broken windows tactic, is kind of a little bit like commercial fishing. Basically what you do is you throw a net over a whole neighborhood, you pull in everybody for every tiny small thing, and then the idea is to get people who have guns or warrants, and then you throw everybody else back. It's an effective strategy to a degree, but it creates a lot of hostility in the target neighborhoods.
Well, and it also creates a lot of revenue for the city, which people then look at as revenue that's derived. We have this phrase that's used, taxation without representation. Well, this isn't even taxation. This is simply just, as some people would call it, public theft without representation.
Yeah, there's really two issues here. The police in this slowdown, they're halting handing out parking tickets, which are enormously lucrative for the city, and then they're also not doing these quality of life summonses, which are a huge hardship on the people who get them, but make significantly less money for the city. So there's two different things going on here. It definitely is a revenue driver for the city, this mass regime of handing out tickets, and it does strike the ear a little bit funny when you hear police union leaders talking about how we're only going to arrest people when we, quote, have to. It seems like that should be the real function of police generally. If they're ticketing and arresting people when they don't have to, then something's up, and that's not right.
As you know, there are a lot of advocates and a lot of activists around the country who have been calling for police to go back to those policies and say your job is to protect the public. It's not to be a revenue driver. You pointed out some inconsistency in why NYPD has been doing this. Shortly after the execution-style shootings of officers Ramos and Liu, the union leaders told their members to respond to all calls with 2 patrol cars and to make arrests only when, as you mentioned, absolutely necessary to avoid potential copycat attacks following the Ramos and Liu assassinations. But that story has been, I guess the right word is evolving over the last few weeks, has it not?
Yeah, absolutely. There have been some strange quotes that have come from union leaders. There was a head of the detectives union who essentially said that, we can't win. When we give out tickets, people call us robotic and unfeeling, but when we exercise discretion and show feelings, we're called, agitators. And, that's a strange thing. That what that suggests is that part of this is that they're trying to show discretion and trying to show sympathy with a public that is tired of getting these tickets. I don't necessarily buy that. I think what's actually going on here is that the police are trying to hurt de Blasio in a way that also doesn't open themselves up to attacks of leaving the city unsafe. and they're now trying to spin this as we're also trying to give up on an unpopular policy. But I don't think that was the intention.
Well, it's interesting here, and I noticed in your work you mentioned specifically the left-right paradigm that's kind of being shattered through this particular frame. What's interesting to me as we look at this is, in the city of New York right now, is there an uptick in crime? Are we seeing an uptick in violence? Are we seeing an uptick in the need for officers to arrest people when absolutely necessary? Or is there kind of that facade that's being unveiled at this point?
No, there isn't, and that's consistent with what a lot of social scientists have known for quite a long time, which is that violent crime, all forms of crime, but particularly violent crime, has been dropping for decades, separate and apart from broken windows, even before it was implemented in the city. And no one really knows the explanation for this. There are a lot of different theories. Some of them are really bizarre. Some people believe seriously that it has to do with the lack of leaded gasoline, that there's just less strange behavior because there's less mental illness. Some people believe it's an influx of immigrants. But this, the end of this lockdown has not prompted a wave of crime the way we saw, for instance, in the blackouts in the 70s, which tells you that something else is going on with the drop of crime, that it's not necessarily these policies that are causing it.
Well, I know you'll continue to follow it. Author and writer for Rolling Stone magazine, Matt Taibbi, thanks so much.
Thanks for having me on.